The stars above the frontier station flickered in the darkness, each one a cold reminder of how far from her home she had been sent. Princess Alith had never imagined that her life would come to this, alone on the edge of the empire, rejected by her own people. Her shoulders felt heavier than her armor, and her chest ached not from exhaustion but from the sting of humiliation. She had been born different from the others of her kind, weaker in ways that mattered most to her empire. The Council of Elders, the royal advisors, and even her own kin had deemed her unfit to lead. She had been a princess only by birth, nothing more. Now she was merely a failure, sent to live among strangers who barely noticed her. The station was small, built to withstand occasional pirate raids rather than to provide comfort. Its corridors smelled faintly of recycled air and machinery oil, and the walls echoed with the footsteps of soldiers too rigid in their drills to welcome anyone new. Alith walked through them silently, her long cloak brushing the floor, wondering what life could possibly offer her here. It was quiet, but it was a dangerous quiet, the kind that could turn into violence without warning. She was aware of the small crew stationed here, their eyes occasionally flicking toward her with curiosity or disdain, neither of which she could return. Then the human ship arrived. Its approach was clumsy, almost absurd compared to the sleek lines of the alien vessels she was used to, yet it carried a presence that immediately made the aliens frown. Humans were often dismissed by her people as fragile and insignificant. That might have been true once on paper, but the humans themselves seemed unbothered by the scorn. They walked through the station with their heads held high, their movements confident despite the obvious lack of grandeur. Among them was a human who would change everything for her, a man whose very presence suggested courage without arrogance. Commander Ethan Hale was tall and lean, with a calm strength that did not need to announce itself. He moved with purpose through the station, checking on supplies, speaking to the crew, and observing the defenses. Where alien guards hesitated, he acted. Where humans worked together, he led quietly, ensuring that no one was left behind. His eyes, dark and steady, seemed to see beyond the surface, beyond appearances, beyond the walls of fear that surrounded Alith herself. It was during the first pirate attack that she truly understood what humans could do. The alarms shrieked through the station, and alien soldiers froze, unsure whether to defend or flee. The pirates, small but fast, swarmed in through the docking bay, their weapons flashing red as they tried to take control. Panic rippled through the station. Alith's heart pounded, and for the first time in her life, she felt a spark of fear that was not from the Council's rejection but from the possibility of death. Then Ethan moved. Without hesitation, he grabbed a weapon, his body sliding through the chaos with the precision of someone who had faced death countless times. He deflected attacks, rescued civilians trapped behind the damaged walls, and coordinated others who had frozen in fear. Alith watched, her breath catching, as he did what her own people could not. There was no hesitation, no arrogance, no desire to prove himself. He fought simply because it was necessary, because it was right. And somehow, in the middle of all this, he glanced at her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with acknowledgement. She followed him instinctively, ducking behind walls, helping where she could, learning quickly that the human's strategy depended not on brute strength but on quick thinking and trust. When a pirate lunged at a civilian, Ethan was there, disarming the threat with calm efficiency. When debris collapsed in the hallway, he helped others out before checking himself. Alith found herself amazed at how humans worked together, each action connecting to the next, creating a flow of movement that was beautiful and terrifying all at once. By the time the first wave of pirates was driven off, the station was damaged, but it still stood. The alien soldiers looked at each other, wide-eyed and uncertain. Their pride had been shattered by the humans' simple courage, and Alith could feel the tension in the air. She had seen many battles before, of course, in training halls and ceremonial fights, but nothing like this. Humans fought not to dominate, not to impress, but to protect. Ethan approached her then, his expression calm but serious. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made her startle. I am," she said, though her voice was soft, almost uncertain. She was not used to being asked such a question without condescension. "And you? You need to be ready." Ethan trained the humans and alien civilians together, showing them tactics that relied on cooperation rather than strength. Alith observed and learned, gradually participating in the defense preparations. She noticed how humans communicated silently, how a single glance could convey orders, how small gestures ensured that everyone moved as one. She had never seen her own species operate like this. Everything her empire valued, power, domination, fear, was absent, yet the results were undeniable. Alith began to speak with Ethan in brief moments of calm, sharing her story in fragments. He listened without interruption, without judgment, simply acknowledging her words. He told her about his own people, about their survival against impossible odds, and how they valued courage, intelligence, and loyalty above all. She realized that the human strength was not in their muscles or weapons, but in their determination and their ability to refuse despair. It was during one of these quiet moments that she first felt a flicker of something dangerous and exhilarating. She had always thought herself powerless, yet beside Ethan, she felt capable of more than she had ever imagined. The frontier station, once a prison, began to feel like a place where she could belong, not because of her title or bloodline, but because she could act, because she could choose to stand up. Another attack came suddenly, far worse than the first. This time, the pirates had learned from their earlier failure and brought heavier weapons. The station shook as energy blasts tore through walls, and the screams of civilians filled the corridors. The alien soldiers panicked, unsure how to respond, while Ethan moved through the chaos as though guided by instinct. He barked orders, moved quickly to rescue those in danger, and never faltered even as the station groaned under fire. Alith followed him, fear sharpening her senses. She found herself helping others not because she was forced to, but because she wanted to. When a small child tripped and fell in the hallway, she grabbed him without hesitation, shielding him from falling debris. Her heart raced, but the warmth of purpose flowed through her. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the decision to act despite it. By the time the battle ended, the station was scarred but still standing. The humans had saved countless lives, and Alith had learned something she could never have imagined. Strength was not always physical, and leadership was not always inherited. As she looked at Ethan, standing calmly amid the wreckage, she understood that hope could be found in the most unexpected of places. For the first time since being cast out, she felt that she had a choice. She could remain the failed princess her empire saw, or she could become someone more, someone who could stand beside those who acted with courage, who valued life, who fought not for power but for hope. And as she watched the stars through the broken windows of the frontier station, she made a silent vow. She would not be powerless again. The frontier station buzzed with activity as repairs began immediately after the attack. Smoke still drifted from scorched walls, and the hum of machinery mingled with the quiet murmurs of survivors. Princess Alith moved among them, carrying supplies and assisting wherever she could. She had expected fear, resentment, or indifference from those around her, but instead she found quiet admiration. Not for her title, which had been stripped away, but for the way she acted without hesitation. Her presence beside the humans had changed something small yet vital in the hearts of those who had once doubted themselves. Commander Ethan Hale watched her from across the damaged command hall, noting the determination in her movements. Humans were used to strangers taking initiative, but alien soldiers rarely did, especially when they were deemed weak or unworthy. Yet here was a princess, rejected by her own empire, who acted decisively and carefully to help the helpless. He allowed himself a faint smile. It was rare to find courage where everyone expected weakness. The aliens in charge of the station had retreated into their offices, discussing strategy and supplies as if their words alone could repair the damage. They debated endlessly, arguing over protocol, while the people they were meant to protect worked quietly to restore order. Alith could feel their frustration and arrogance, yet she ignored it. For the first time, she no longer relied on their approval. She relied on action and on the humans beside her. As night fell, a quiet tension settled over the station. Ethan gathered the human crew and a few alien volunteers in the central hall, explaining the lessons learned from the first attack. He spoke calmly but firmly, highlighting the weaknesses in the station's defense and outlining strategies to protect civilians in the future. Every word was precise, every instruction practical. His voice carried not authority by rank, but authority by understanding. Alith listened closely. She could see the logic in his planning, and she realized how little her empire valued intelligence over brute force. The humans coordinated in ways that the aliens would never consider, using teamwork, communication, and anticipation rather than fear and intimidation. She could not help but compare it to her own people, who had always relied on strength, status, and fear to maintain control. The difference was stark, and it left her both awed and uneasy. During the briefing, a young alien soldier raised a trembling hand. "Princess Alith," he said, voice shaky, "why do you follow the humans? They are weak. Surely we should obey our own leaders." She was learning quickly, and more importantly, she was choosing to act differently from the people who had rejected her. Over the next few days, training began in earnest. Humans and aliens practiced together under Ethan's guidance, running drills that tested coordination, reflexes, and problem-solving. Alith joined them whenever possible, learning to move efficiently, to anticipate danger, and to protect others. She discovered muscles she had never used and skills she had never considered. Every small success built her confidence, and with each passing hour, she felt a shift inside herself. Fear no longer dominated her thoughts, determination did. Ethan spent time observing her during these drills. "You have a gift," he said one evening as they repaired a broken console together. "Not of strength, but of perception. You notice details others miss, and you react in ways that keep people safe. My empire expects me to be nothing." She realized that she could choose what mattered, and that recognition alone could fuel her resolve. The peace, however, was temporary. Another attack came without warning, this one more coordinated than the first. Pirates, now seemingly allied with rogue factions of the Empire, descended on the station with advanced ships and heavier weapons. The alarms blared once again, red lights painting the halls in stark warning. Civilians scrambled for cover, and alien soldiers faltered under the sudden pressure. Ethan moved immediately, directing the humans and remaining alien soldiers into defensive positions. "Stay calm, stay together, and protect the civilians at all costs," he shouted. His voice carried over the chaos, a steady guide in a storm of panic. Alith felt the familiar surge of fear, but she pushed it aside. She knew what to do now. She moved through the corridors, guiding civilians to safe zones, helping the wounded, and coordinating with human fighters who relied on her judgment. Her movements were precise, her decisions quick. Where once she had been paralyzed by doubt, she now acted with clarity and purpose. During the battle, a pirate broke through a side corridor, weapon raised. Alith froze for a moment, but then she remembered Ethan's instructions and acted. She grabbed a nearby pipe, striking the pirate with precision, then moved him aside to prevent harm to a nearby child. The action was swift and deliberate, demonstrating that courage was not just about fighting, it was about protecting and thinking under pressure. Ethan appeared beside her, taking a different route to intercept other threats. "You did well," he said quickly, glancing at her before moving on. "Keep it up, don't stop." Humans coordinated attacks, covering each other and drawing enemy fire strategically. Alien soldiers began to adapt, following the humans' example, though reluctantly. The pirates, surprised by the coordinated defense, found themselves at a disadvantage despite their superior technology. Alith realized something extraordinary. Strength could be measured in many ways. Brute force was only one path, and intelligence, courage, and loyalty could match it, sometimes surpass it. By the end of the attack, the station had suffered damage, but far fewer lives were lost than could have been expected. Survivors looked around in shock and relief, realizing that they had endured because of the humans' guidance and Alith's growing leadership. Alien soldiers who had doubted her before now looked at her with respect, and even the human crew acknowledged her contributions. That night after the battle, Alith stood on the observation deck, staring at the stars once more. The station was quiet, the hum of machinery a gentle reminder that life continued. She thought of her empire, of the council that had rejected her, and of the humans who had shown her a new way to measure strength. Ethan joined her silently, offering no words at first, simply standing beside her. The shared quiet was comforting. Finally, he spoke. "You did well today. You've grown stronger than most realize." "I could not have done it alone," she admitted. You showed me another way. I see it now. Strength is not what I thought it was." It was a bond built not on titles or bloodlines, but on courage, respect, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. In the days that followed, Alith continued to train and to lead alongside Ethan. The frontier station became a symbol of resilience, a place where humans and aliens worked together, learning from one another. Each day brought new challenges, but Alith faced them with a confidence she had never known. The memory of rejection still lingered, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it fueled her determination to become someone worthy of standing beside those who fought not for power, but for hope. She began to understand that her journey was only beginning. The empire that had cast her aside was still vast and dangerous, and the threats beyond the station were far from over. But for the first time, she felt ready. She had discovered that true strength lay in action, in courage, in protecting those who could not protect themselves. And she had discovered that even a rejected princess could find hope, standing beside a human who refused to back down in the face of danger. As the stars twinkled endlessly above, Alith felt a new resolve solidifying within her. She would not simply survive. She would act, she would lead, and she would fight for a future defined not by fear and rejection, but by courage, cooperation, and hope. The frontier station, scarred but alive, reflected that same determination. And as she looked toward the horizon, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it not as a discarded princess, but as someone who had chosen her own path, and someone who had discovered that humans could teach even the strongest lessons about strength, loyalty, and the power of hope. The days after the second attack were tense. The frontier station had survived, but it was clear that the threats were only growing. Reports came in of more pirate activity, this time with rumors that rogue factions from Alith's own empire were secretly supporting them. Supplies were scarce, morale was fragile, and the alien soldiers stationed there began to show cracks in their loyalty. Many were unwilling to follow orders that had once seemed simple, unsure whether to trust a human commander or a princess they had once ridiculed. Ethan Hale did not waver. Each day he worked tirelessly, inspecting defenses, coordinating training, and preparing for the inevitable next assault. He treated the alien soldiers with the same respect as the humans, understanding that fear and hesitation could be overcome through guidance, not punishment. Alith observed his methods closely, noting the difference between leadership that relied on fear and leadership that inspired courage. The lesson was clear. Strength without understanding was meaningless, but wisdom and courage together could move mountains. Alith had become more than an observer. She now took active roles in patrols, defense planning, and civilian protection. She moved among the humans and aliens with confidence, her presence commanding respect without demanding it. The bond between her and Ethan had grown, not just as allies in battle, but as partners in strategy. Where he was calm and methodical, she had learned to act decisively and anticipate problems before they arose. Together, they formed a network of action and thought that inspired others around them. Then came the day the pirates returned in full force. This time, their fleet was larger, equipped with heavier weapons and clearly organized. They had learned from the previous failures, and it was evident that they were no longer a mere nuisance. They were a threat capable of overwhelming the station. The alarms rang out with urgency, and the inhabitants braced themselves. The civilians, though frightened, followed evacuation procedures they had practiced, showing that training and preparation had made a difference. Ethan moved through the corridors like a storm of calm energy. He directed human fighters, positioned alien soldiers, and checked on civilians. His movements were precise, each action purposeful, each instruction clear. Alith followed him, helping wherever she could, guiding others to safety, and ensuring that defensive systems were operating correctly. She had never felt such clarity in her actions before. Fear existed, but it was now a tool, sharpened into vigilance rather than paralysis. The first wave of pirate ships struck the outer perimeter, blasting energy barriers and docking bays. Explosions shook the station, sending debris and alarms ringing through every corridor. Alien soldiers faltered, unsure how to respond under the heavy fire. But the humans acted in perfect coordination, covering each other, guiding civilians, and countering the attacks strategically. Alith watched closely, learning new techniques and adapting her own instincts to match the demands of real combat. She moved down a corridor toward the control room when a blast rocked the station. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see. A group of civilians froze in panic, unsure which way to go. Without hesitation, she grabbed a young alien child by the hand and led them toward safety, signaling others to follow. She found herself moving instinctively, her mind calculating risk, distance, and timing, all while keeping the civilians protected. When she reached a safe zone, she paused, her chest heaving with exertion. It was exhausting, terrifying, but exhilarating. She was no longer just a princess or a failure, she was a protector. Ethan appeared beside her, having intercepted another group of intruders. "Keep going," he said simply, checking the evac routes. "We're holding them off for now." "Stay with the people, don't stop." Alien soldiers who had doubted her began following her orders without hesitation, recognizing the value of action over rank. The battle escalated as the pirates breached deeper into the station. Heavy blasts shook the walls, and alarms screamed continuously. Human fighters moved in groups, covering each other while drawing the pirates into traps and defensive chokepoints. Ethan's strategy was simple but brilliant. Use knowledge, coordination, and determination to make up for the lack of raw power. The pirates, confident in their technology and numbers, underestimated the humans and Alith. Each counterattack by the defenders reduced the pirates' momentum, forcing them to adapt in real time. Alith found herself facing a pirate leader in the cargo bay, a heavily armed opponent clearly more skilled than anyone she had encountered before. Her first instinct was to retreat, to seek safety, but then she remembered everything she had learned: anticipation, calmness, and protection. She ducked under his strike, disarmed him using precise movements, and secured him without unnecessary force. The pirate stared at her, disbelief evident in his eyes. She realized that strength was not always about overpowering someone. Sometimes it was about control, decision, and resolve. Elsewhere, Ethan directed the defense of the station's main bridge. He coordinated energy shields, directed counterattacks, and ensured that critical systems remained operational. Humans and alien soldiers worked together seamlessly under his guidance. Alith, watching from the observation deck, felt a sense of pride, not for herself alone, but for the unity that had been created. The combined effort of humans, aliens, and even the determined civilians had formed a force capable of standing against overwhelming odds. Hours passed. The station shook under repeated assaults, but the pirates' momentum waned. They had expected chaos and disarray, yet they found order, strategy, and courage. The humans' refusal to yield, combined with Alith's emerging leadership, disrupted the pirates' plans. By the time the last wave attempted to breach the docking bay, the defenders were ready. Coordinated attacks, clever maneuvers, and sheer determination forced the pirates to retreat. When silence fell over the station, the cost was visible. Walls were scorched, equipment damaged, and the wounded attended to. But the people were alive, and the station had endured. Humans, aliens, and civilians alike gathered, exhausted but relieved. They had survived not because of the strength of a single individual, but because of cooperation, courage, and decisive action. Alith leaned against the railing of the observation deck, looking at the stars through the broken windows. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a new sense of purpose. She had faced fear and chaos and emerged stronger, not only in skill but in spirit. For the first time, she understood that true leadership was about protecting others, inspiring action, and making the right decisions even when the outcome was uncertain. Ethan joined her silently, and for a moment they both watched the stars. "You did well," he said, finally breaking the silence. "You've learned quickly, but more importantly, you've acted when it mattered. That is the lesson humans have learned too. We survive because we act together, because we refuse to give up. Strength alone is meaningless without purpose." "I can still act with purpose." In the following days, Alith focused on training and preparation. She helped organize defenses, guided drills, and continued learning from Ethan. She saw the humans' adaptability, their ability to improvise, and their unwavering commitment to each other. Alien soldiers began to follow her lead, gaining confidence from her actions rather than relying on outdated hierarchies. Civilians who had once cowered in fear now moved with purpose, reassured by the example set by humans and their chosen princess. Alith's confidence grew not because she had discovered extraordinary power within herself, but because she had learned to act with clarity, courage, and intelligence. Her empire's rejection no longer defined her. Each decision, each small act of protection and leadership reinforced the knowledge that she could make a difference. She stood on the observation deck one evening, watching the stars twinkle in the endless void. The frontier station, battered and scarred, remained alive, a testament to resilience, cooperation, and hope. Alith realized that the empire that had discarded her was not the measure of her worth. Instead, her actions, her courage, and her choice to stand beside humans who refused to give up defined who she had become. Ethan joined her once more, silent but steady. Together, they looked outward, toward the unknown challenges that awaited. Alith's heart no longer carried the weight of rejection alone. It carried purpose, determination, and hope. She knew the road ahead would be dangerous, that enemies would not give up easily, and that the frontier was far from safe. Yet she also knew something stronger. True courage and strength came from action, unity, and the willingness to protect others. And in that understanding, she had found a spark that no empire, no council, and no enemy could ever extinguish. As the stars continued to shine above the battered frontier station, Alith made a silent vow. She would face whatever came next with courage. She would fight not for power or recognition, but for hope and for those who could not defend themselves. And she would stand beside humans not because they were stronger, but because they had taught her the most important lesson of all. That strength, true strength, comes from heart, mind, and unwavering determination. The frontier station had become more than a base of defense. It was a symbol. Word of the humans, courage, and the princess who stood beside them had spread across nearby systems. Some aliens whispered in awe, others muttered in anger. Alith had grown into a figure of inspiration, not because she was royal, but because she acted decisively and protected those who could not protect themselves. She had become a bridge between species, a living proof that strength was not measured by power alone. But not all were pleased. Reports reached the station of dissent and unrest within her empire. The council had noticed her absence and her defiance, and whispers of betrayal had spread. They could not tolerate a princess who chose to align herself with humans, who ignored the traditions of bloodline and brute strength. They demanded her return, her obedience, and her submission to the rules she had already broken. The messages were cold, threatening, and clear: return or face the consequences. Alith read the latest transmission in silence, her fingers brushing the smooth control panel of the station. She felt no fear, not the fear that had once paralyzed her, but determination. Her heart beat with the lessons she had learned: courage, intelligence, loyalty, and hope. She could not return to a system that valued fear over action, power over compassion. She had seen what humans could do, and she had learned what real strength meant. Ethan stood beside her, silent and steady as always. "They expect you to bow," he said simply, his dark eyes calm. "Do they not understand what you've become? And they will try to force me to remember what they believe I should be. But I am no longer who they want me to be. I choose my own path." The humans prepared, knowing that the upcoming battle would be unlike any they had faced before. Alien soldiers who had once doubted Alith now stood beside her, ready to follow her orders. Civilians, too, had grown confident in their ability to defend themselves. The station was ready, not just for defense, but for a stand that could challenge the traditions of an entire empire. As the enemy fleet approached, Alith and Ethan coordinated the defenses. They moved quickly, issuing orders, positioning fighters, and preparing countermeasures. The humans were calm, precise, and disciplined, while the alien soldiers learned to rely on cooperation rather than instinct alone. Alith felt a surge of pride, not for herself, but for the unity that had formed under her guidance. This was what she had been missing all her life: the ability to act decisively, to protect, and to inspire. The battle began with sudden intensity. The enemy fleet opened fire, and the station shook under the energy blasts. Shields flared, alarms blared, and corridors trembled with the force of impact. The humans and aliens fought in coordination, using every trick, tactic, and strategy they had practiced. They moved not as individuals, but as a single organism, each action complementing the next. The enemy fleet had expected submission. They had not expected resistance, ingenuity, and courage. Alith took the command center, issuing orders with calm authority. She directed energy shields, assigned teams to protect critical systems, and personally oversaw the evacuation of civilians from the most dangerous areas. Alien soldiers followed her commands without hesitation, recognizing the logic and courage behind each decision. Even the humans deferred to her judgment in crucial moments, trusting her instincts and the calm decisiveness that had grown in her over months of struggle. Ethan moved through the battlefield, coordinating attacks, directing fighters, and ensuring the defense remained strong. He glanced at Alith from time to time, noting her growing confidence and precision. "You've grown into a true leader," he said quietly when a brief pause allowed. "Not because of your title, but because of your choices." She had learned that leadership was not about command alone. It was about understanding, anticipating, and acting decisively. This was what her empire had never taught her, and now she wielded it as her greatest weapon. The enemy fleet intensified their attacks, concentrating fire on the station's main corridors. Explosions ripped through walls, and smoke filled the air. Alien soldiers faltered under the pressure, but Alith moved among them, steadying nerves, giving precise instructions, and showing them that courage was contagious. She had learned from humans that fear could be faced, that hesitation could be replaced with action. With her guidance, alien soldiers who had once doubted themselves now held their ground, even against superior forces. In one corridor, Alith faced a squad of enemy soldiers who had broken through. She did not hesitate. She moved with precision, disabling weapons, directing trapped civilians to safety, and coordinating reinforcements. Her actions were calculated, each movement protecting life while neutralizing threats. The enemy was skilled, but they underestimated the combination of intelligence, courage, and unity that had grown here. Alith had become a force not because of brute strength, but because she could act where others could not. Ethan intercepted another group attempting to breach the central energy core. He worked alongside human fighters, covering each other while ensuring the core remained functional. The humans' ability to coordinate flawlessly under pressure frustrated the enemy fleet, whose reliance on power and intimidation failed against strategy and unity. Alith watched, noting each tactic, learning, adapting, and guiding others to implement similar strategies across the station. Hours passed, the battle intensifying and ebbing in waves. The enemy fleet struggled to gain ground against the coordinated defense. The humans' adaptability, combined with Alith's leadership and the courage of the alien soldiers, turned the tide. Finally, the enemy commander, recognizing the unexpected resilience, attempted a retreat. Explosions and energy blasts marked their withdrawal, leaving the frontier station battered but intact. The station was quiet once more, save for the hum of damaged machinery and the low murmur of exhausted survivors. Civilians moved among the injured, humans and aliens alike providing care and support. Alith walked through the corridors, checking on everyone, her presence steady and reassuring. She realized that leadership was not about glory, but about responsibility and action. She had grown from a rejected princess into someone capable of inspiring courage and hope in others. Later, in the observation deck, Alith and Ethan watched the stars in silence. The station bore scars from the battle, but it still stood. The fleet of her empire had retreated, and her rebellion had gained visibility. Some whispered of her courage, others feared her influence, but all recognized that she had changed. She was no longer a pawn of the council. She was a symbol of what was possible when courage and intelligence overcame fear and tradition. "They will not accept this easily," Ethan said quietly. "Your empire will try again. They may come with more forces or different tactics, but you've shown them what true strength looks like. They cannot ignore it. My people may not understand me yet, but I will act, and I will lead in the way I know is right." She had been rejected, abandoned, and underestimated her entire life. Yet she had learned that her worth was not defined by others, but by her actions and her determination to protect and inspire. The frontier station, standing against impossible odds, reflected the same resolve. Together with the humans and those alien soldiers who had chosen to stand beside her, she had built something stronger than fear, stronger than tradition, stronger than the empire itself. In the coming days, she would face her empire once more. The council would demand her submission, but she was no longer the frightened princess who had arrived at the frontier station. She was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of courage, and she would face them not with fear, but with resolve. The future of her empire, and perhaps countless lives across the stars, might depend on the strength she had found and the humans who had shown her the true meaning of courage. As the stars sparkled in the endless sky above, Alith made a silent vow. She would not surrender, she would not yield, and she would lead with the courage she had discovered beside a human fighter who refused to back down. The empire could try to crush her, but she had learned a lesson that no council, no decree, and no tradition could erase. True strength was measured by courage, unity, and the willingness to act when others faltered. And with that understanding, she was ready for whatever challenges awaited. The stars above the frontier station shone like silent witnesses to the struggle that had changed Alith's life. The last battle had passed, leaving scars on the station and on its inhabitants, but it had also brought clarity. She was no longer a princess defined by her birth or rejected by her empire. She had become a leader through courage, intelligence, and decisive action. The humans who had stood beside her were more than allies. They were teachers, friends, and examples of what true strength could be. Reports from distant systems arrived, telling of ripple effects across the empire. The council, previously confident in its absolute control, had been shaken. Word of the frontier station's defense spread quickly. Aliens whispered about the princess who refused to bow, who stood with humans against impossible odds. Some debated whether to confront her again, while others quietly began to question the rigid laws and traditions that had led to so much fear and weakness. Alith listened carefully, aware that change was slow, but that a single spark could ignite hope in even the darkest places. Ethan moved through the station as always, checking systems, speaking with human fighters, and coordinating repairs. His presence was calm, reassuring, and steady, a perfect complement to Alith's growing confidence. She watched him for a moment, thinking about how far she had come. Just months ago, she had been a discarded princess, uncertain of her own worth, hiding behind walls of fear and expectation. Now she acted with clarity, guiding others, protecting lives, and inspiring courage in those around her. Alith walked to the observation deck and gazed at the stars, letting the quiet calm fill her mind. The frontier station had survived, yes, but it had become more than a defensive outpost. It had become a symbol of unity, courage, and hope. She realized that the frontier had been more than a punishment from her empire. It had been a place of learning, a place where she could discover who she truly was. The council sent one final delegation, a fleet more advanced than before, carrying both threats and promises. Their message was clear: return to the empire, surrender your defiance, or face destruction. Alith read the transmission with calm resolve. She had faced fear before, and she had chosen action over hesitation. She would not yield to intimidation or tradition. She would stand for what was right, and she would do it with courage. Ethan joined her as she prepared a response. "This is your decision," he said. "Whatever happens, you have the strength to face it. Not for glory, but for hope." The civilians, trained and guided by months of preparation, moved with purpose, reinforcing barricades and aiding the wounded. Alith took a deep breath and activated the station's communication system. She addressed the incoming fleet, her voice calm, clear, and resolute. "I am Princess Alith. I will not return to the Empire to bow before fear and cruelty. I stand here with humans, aliens, and civilians alike. We defend life, courage, and hope. If you wish to fight us, you will face not just strength, but unity, intelligence, and determination." They could see the resolve in the eyes of the station's defenders, the coordination between humans and aliens, and the unwavering courage of a princess who refused to yield. The battle that followed was intense but brief. The enemy fleet attempted to breach the station, but the defenders had anticipated every move. Energy shields flared, fighters intercepted intruders, and humans and alien soldiers coordinated attacks with precision. Alith directed operations from the command center, her mind calculating, her decisions fast and effective. She had become the center of a living network of defense, each action designed to protect, coordinate, and inspire. Ethan moved alongside the defenders, covering vulnerable points and ensuring civilians remained safe. He glanced at Alith occasionally, noting her calm authority, her ability to act decisively under pressure, and her growing confidence. She was no longer the rejected princess. She was the heart of the station, the guiding force that turned fear into courage. The enemy fleet, despite superior numbers and technology, found themselves at a disadvantage. They had expected chaos and submission, but instead encountered unity, strategy, and resilience. Human ingenuity, combined with Alith's leadership, disrupted their plans at every turn. By the time the final wave of attacks came, the attackers were forced to retreat, unable to overcome a force stronger than any individual power. As the dust settled, Alith walked among the survivors. She helped lift debris, comforted the frightened, and encouraged the weary. The station had survived, not because of weapons or technology alone, but because of courage, intelligence, and cooperation. Humans, alien soldiers, and civilians had all played their part, and she had stood at the center, guiding them with calm authority. Ethan joined her on the observation deck once more, the station glowing faintly beneath the stars. "You've done more than survive," he said. "You've inspired change. Your empire cannot ignore this." Alith worked tirelessly alongside Ethan and the humans, teaching alien soldiers new strategies, showing civilians how to protect themselves, and coordinating defenses against possible threats. Every action reinforced the lesson she had learned. Leadership was not inherited, power was not absolute, and courage could inspire even the most fearful. Word of their victory spread across the empire, reaching alien worlds far beyond the frontier. Some were inspired, quietly questioning the rigid traditions that had governed them for centuries. Others feared Alith's influence, recognizing that a single act of courage could disrupt the balance of power. Yet regardless of reaction, the message was clear. Strength was no longer measured by birth or fear, but by action, intelligence, and unity. Alith's own people eventually arrived, this time not with threats but with cautious curiosity. The council sent envoys, unsure how to handle a princess who had defied them and emerged victorious. Alith met them calmly, her posture steady, her voice firm. "I will not return to the Empire as you demand," she said. "I have learned what true strength is, and I will lead in a way that protects life and inspires courage. You may offer your titles and your commands, but they mean nothing if they are used to enforce fear and weakness." They had expected submission, yet here stood the princess who had defied them with intelligence, courage, and unwavering purpose. For the first time, they saw that leadership could be earned through action, not demanded through hierarchy. Alith turned to Ethan, who stood silently beside her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for showing me what courage really is. You found it yourself, I only helped you see it." Humans had shown her that strength was measured not by force, but by heart, mind, and unity. She would carry that lesson wherever she went, changing her world in ways the Council could never imagine. In the quiet moments that followed, she stood on the observation deck, watching the stars twinkle endlessly. The frontier station hummed beneath her feet, alive with the energy of people who had learned courage, determination, and hope. Alith felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced rejection, fear, and impossible odds, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to lead. The Empire might resist, and threats would always exist, but she no longer feared them. She had discovered a truth that could never be taken away. Courage, unity, and intelligence could overcome fear, tyranny, and doubt. She was no longer a rejected princess. She was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of hope across the stars. As she gazed at the endless sky, she knew that whatever challenges awaited, she and those who stood beside her would face them with courage, determination, and unwavering resolve. The frontier station would endure, and with it, the lesson that hope and true strength are never measured by birth, but by the choices we make and the courage we show when it matters most. And so, among the stars, Princess Alith stood tall, no longer defined by rejection, but by action, courage, and the hope she carried for countless others. Humanity had shown her the way, and she would never forget it. Together, they had forged a future where courage could flourish, hope could thrive, and strength was measured not by power alone, but by the heart that refuses to yield.